Here we go. One step at a time, don't be living on the line.
Today's lesson is going to look more closely at a purely monopolistic firm producing output in a monopolistic market. As we saw in a previous lesson in which we introduced the monopolistic model, the demand as seen by a pure monopolist represents the total market demand for the good being produced. This makes sense because the firm is the only producer. There is no need to draw two separate diagrams as we did in perfect competition, one for the market for the output and one for the individual firm. The individual firm's demand is the market demand. Also in our previous lesson, we illustrated and explained why marginal revenue for a monopolist always lies below the demand curve for the monopolist. This means that at any given level of output, the firm's marginal revenue will be less than the price that it sells its output for. In today's lesson, we're going to explore three different concepts relating to pure monopoly. First, we're going to revisit the profit maximization rule that we learned in our unit on perfect competition and determine whether the same rule for maximizing profits applies to a monopolist. We'll compare the profit maximizing level of output produced by a monopolistic firm to the revenue maximizing level of output. And we'll determine where a monopolist should produce in order to maximize its total revenues instead of its profits. Finally, we will be looking at the price elasticity of demand for a monopolist's output, and we'll see how we can determine over which range of output demand is relatively elastic and over which range of output demand is relatively inelastic for a monopolist's product. Let's begin with the profit maximization rule. When studying perfect competition, we learned that in order to maximize its profits, a firm should always produce at the level of output where the marginal revenue to the firm equals the firm's marginal cost of production. At this level of output, there is no way a firm can increase its total profits by either reducing its output or by increasing its output. Let's look at our graph and determine what the profit maximizing level of output for this monopolist is. First, we have our marginal revenue curve. We can see that marginal revenue slopes downwards and marginal cost slopes upwards, but there is clearly a point at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This point right here is our profit maximization point. A monopolist hoping to maximize his total profits should determine the level of output at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And that quantity right there, we'll call that QPM for the profit maximizing quantity. So the question is, how do we illustrate the area of economic profits earned by a monopolist at this quantity? Now, a mistake that students commonly make, and I'm going to show you this mistake so that you don't make it yourself in the future, is to draw a dotted line over from this point and indicate that this is the price the firm will charge at its profit maximizing level of output. This is a mistake, however, because in fact, that dotted line indicates the firm's marginal cost and its marginal revenue at the quantity of QPM. To find the price, we must go all the way up to the demand curve, because as you recall, demand represents the willingness and ability of consumers to pay for a good. Therefore, demand represents the price that consumers are willing to pay. So in fact, the price the monopolist will charge when producing at its profit maximizing quantity is determined by the level of demand for that quantity. If a monopolist charged a price lower than that, down here, equal to its marginal revenue, let's say, clearly there would be a disequilibrium in the market because the quantity demanded at a price of MR is much greater than the quantity that the monopolist is actually producing. There would be a shortage in the market at a price of MR. Therefore, a monopolist will not charge that price. Instead, it will charge the price that consumers are willing to pay for this particular quantity, which on our graph is QPM. Let's illustrate the area representing the firm's economic profits at a quantity of QPM. In order to find and calculate economic profits, we must know the average total cost, because total profits equal price minus average total cost times the quantity being produced. All we need now is our average total cost because we have the price and we have the quantity that the firm will produce. In order to find average total cost, we'd go up from the quantity to our ATC curve, draw a dotted line over, and right there on our vertical axis is the firm's average total cost of producing QPM units. The area of economic profit, therefore, is simply the price minus the average total cost times the quantity. And on our graph, it is a rectangle. The blue rectangle on our graph represents the maximum level of economic profits that this monopolist can hope to achieve given the level of demand that it faces and given its costs of production. Any level of output greater or less than QPM will result in a reduction in the size of its profit rectangle. Therefore, by producing at QPM, the firm maximizes its total profits. We can see that a purely monopolistic seller